Alright, this is just a really quick instructional video on exporting, on making cosmetic changes to enemies in XCOM 2 War of the Chosen. This won't be going over the code aspect, being instructions on how to code an enemy to make an enemy in XCOM 2 isn't particularly hard to find, and I believe the reason that this video was requested was so that it's just a cosmetic alternative to a Viper, although for this we'll be using a sectoid. But I will be showing you how to export a enemy model from XCOM 2's editor to make changes to it within Blender, and then to re-import it into the editor. So, let's go ahead and do this. I've got my Mod Buddy tutorial project set up. I have made a, with the editor, obviously you have to choose an empty mod and then populate the file structure yourself. For this, I have just made the content folder because that's all we'll be going over. And then I've also got my content browser, the editor, up. So we're going to go ahead and look up sectoid. And we will be looking for a skeletal mesh of a sectoid. This looks like it right here. We're also going to want to find, I believe, the archetype for the sectoid, if we can. Yep, that looks like it. Just double checking real quick. If this crashes, that's going to be a trip. By the way, I'm eating pie and ice cream at the same time as I'm doing this. Okay. And I'm just looking for a skeletal mesh section here. There we go. Okay. Skeletal mesh sectoid animation. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. First off, for the sectoid in the sectoid anim folder, we're going to take this SM sectoid, skeletal mesh sectoid, and we're going to extract this. We see exports to file here after right-clicking on it. And we're going to go to wherever you want to make a work area for your mods. I have on my desktop. There is an XCOM 2 mods folder, and I'm just going to make a tutorial folder here. And I'm not going to worry about file structure for this. I'm just going to export, and you see sm_sectoid.fbx. So we're going to save that. Now, we're going to go into here and into Blender, and I've already removed all the starting objects in the scene whenever you start Blender. We're going to go to File, Import, FBX. I'm going to go to my desktop XCOM 2 tutorial SM sectoid. Okay, so here's the sectoid. And this looks correct. Normally, if you import with the correct settings, the skeleton will have these bones facing outwards, and this bottom bone right here, which I believe determines its position in the game, will always be facing out to the right if you're looking at the unit head-on. Anyway, for this is going to be real easy. So what I did was I went to Sketchfab, and I got this top hat model, and this is what I'm going to use to modify our mesh. As just an example, I believe just a moment. I believe Eclipse stated that they wanted a Viper that had like an Amazonian style with bones and skulls and stuff. So this is basically the same sort of thing you'll be doing. So let me go ahead. I've already extracted the top hat, but I'm going to go ahead and copy the assets and put them in my folder for my mods. Okay. So now it should be in an OBJ format, this particular one. So I'm going to go ahead and tutorial source. No? Okay, let's double check that real quick. Source. Oh, it's in a zip file. Okay. And let me check the textures real quick. Yeah, the textures are fine. Okay. So now, there we go. Top hat. Oh, crap, that thing's big. All right, that's fine. So we're going to scale this thing down. And we're not going to be too concerned about the orientation. It is turned sideways, so I'll just hit the rotate button. And let me see what angle this rotates. Okay, so let's set that to 90 degrees. Nope, 0. Let's lock it to the z-axis, so it only rotates to the z-axis. And let's go 45, see what direction it goes. That was actually terrible. It should be symmetrical on both sides, so I'll just set it to 90. Okay. And then we can simply hold down that blue arrow to transform it up. Alright. And we're just wanting to get this... I'm actually going to go to... I'm going to expand the sectoid area, and I'm going to hide with this little eye symbol to hide the bones, the skeletons. We don't really care about that right now. All we want is to get this properly sized. So I'm going to hit S to scale again, and I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. That looks pretty good. Back it up a little bit. Alright, and I'm going to take this to edit mode, see if there's any clipping that I can notice. I don't see any clipping. It looks to be pretty good on all sides. And I kind of like the size, and like it seems to fit pretty well. So there's our sectoid with the top hat. Okay. So, alright. So next up, if we were to just save this as an FBX and like import it, it wouldn't work. This hat wouldn't move at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to first off grab this mesh symbol here, and you want to drag it over the root symbol and just set parent to object, because we're going to weight this ourselves. Now occasionally I'm going to actually control Z that real quick. I think I can control Z that. Guess I can't. Alright. Occasionally you can set to drop parent, and you can I think I can Alt P. Nope. Control Z. Oh, it's because I'm in edit mode, isn't it? Yeah, okay. So if we go over to the armature section, you can see it doesn't have any vertex groups. This is what determines, what bones affect this particular object. If we were to drag it over root, we could instead hit with empty groups, and this would automatically populate it with all of the groups that exist in this root folder. For our purposes for this, that's a little over the top, because it'll be giving us like leg bones and stuff that isn't going to affect the hat. But it might be useful, because in some of these arms and legs, there are a lot of bones that you might not think about, like a bone specifically for when the leg twists, or just a lot of complex stuff. But if it's just something like a headpiece, then we should just be able to do it as object, and we can make our own vertex group. So if we show the pose again, we can actually hit this the original sectoid model, and I can see it. The head bone should just be called head. Yeah, right there, head. So all we need to do is when we go to the top hat is we type in a new group. We just call it head. And that's all it takes. Then what we want to do is we want to go into, and I'm going to hide the bones again. I want to go into weight paint mode. Now, when you're in weight paint mode, blue is entirely unpainted. There's no weights applied, and that means it won't move when that particular vertex group we're associated on moves. If you want to see what this looks like, if we change this to weight paint mode, here's the head, and you can see how the weights affect the head bone. So when the head moves, this will move with it. So what we want, and if I show the root again, and I'm actually going to give this sticks, and I want X-ray, and I want to go into pose mode to see what it looks like, and I want names so I can see what I'm looking at. It's a little hard to find the head bone. There we go. So there's the head, and you can see if we rotate the head, it rotates the head. Looks a little unnatural at that position, but whatever. It rotates the head. But we can see that the top hat isn't rotating. That's also because it's a separate object currently, which will probably keep it a separate object, just for convenience's sake. But anyway, back to the top hat. We want this thing to move with the head. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go... We don't actually have to weight paint it by hand for this particular object. Now, if this was a more complex object, like let's say maybe an elbow pad, we might want to manually paint it so that it properly bends with the arm when the elbow bends. But for this, and when painting, all you really do is you set your the radius of your little painter tool. You've got different modes for adding, subtracting stuff, and you just paint across the object wherever the particular bone that you want the that part of the mesh to contort with. So if I say had a wrist guard, I would want it to paint it to the forearm bone so that when the forearm moves, that object, that wrist guard, moves with it. So for our hat here, we want this to move to the head bone. Now I could just simply paint this whole thing and it would work. But for objects that you just want to have painted to a single bone... Oh, and by the way, painting is per vertex or per vertices, not for faces. So you can hit Z to enter wireframe mode and you just target vertices. But anyway, what I'm going to be doing instead is I'm going to be going into edit mode, and you can see that all of the in this instance, all of the vertices are selected. If they aren't selected, you can enter wireframe mode, and then you can hit C, use the scroll wheel, and you can select all of these. So let me show you, for example, I've selected one vertice there. The rest of the hat is unselected. I can hit C, and while you're in wireframe mode, you can select objects or select vertices that are through other vertices that would normally be hidden, and we can just select the whole object that way. Alright, and then we see over here at vertex groups, we have some new buttons: assign, remove, select, and deselect. For this, we want to assign all of these vertices to the head vertex group. And we just hit the assign button, and then we go back to weight paint, and you can see the entire hat is red now. The entire hat has been weighted. And so if we go back to the root, and we can see we're back in pose mode, And I can move the head, and that's not working. Huh. Let's double check. Make sure we've got the right thing here. Oh, yes, of course. I'm missing out on something important. We also want to add a modifier, armature, and we want it associated with the root. So now if I... you just go into this wrench icon, add modifier, armature, object, root, and that should be it. Then if I rotate the head, you can see that the hat rotates with it perfectly. And that's literally it. So then all we want to do is we want to shift-click on our additions, which is the top hat in this case. We want to shift-click on the original mesh. So you can see both of those are selected. We want to shift-click on the root. And I'm also going to shift-click on our armature, which is called root. And we want to shift-click on the top-level object. And then from there, we're going to go to export. We're going to export this as a FBX. We're going to select this selected object setting. For smoothing, you want face smoothing, and you want to check tangent space. This will remove smoothing errors when you import the object. Smoothing errors won't actually ruin anything. It'll still import just fine. It'll just give you an annoying error. We want to remove add leaf bones. The default settings should be fine, and it should be fine in this instance because it imported under these settings and it was fine, which is y-axis, x-axis. But for some objects, especially if you're importing, say, a soldier helmet and you're exporting it, you want it to be x-axis negative y-axis. But for this, it should be fine with y-axis, x-axis. And with all of that, we should be good, and then we can just save this wherever we want to put this, which is going to be over here, and we want this to be dapper sectoid.fbx. We're going to export this to FBX. And then I'm going to go into the editor. Okay, so next up what we want to do is we want to go ahead and create a copy of this sectoid. So I right-clicked on it and click Create a Copy. It's going to ask us what package we want to do. This is where we're going to make our new package. And I'm just going to call this Dapper Sectoid. It's going to select the meshes grouping because that's the same grouping that the original that we're copying is in. And I'm just going to do SM Dapper Sectoid. Okay. So that's going to take a moment to populate the new package. And you can see here it's got an asterisk next to it. That means that there's changes to this package that have been made that haven't been saved. And so we can actually save this package as a file, because if you mess with an unsaved package too much, it's liable to make the editor crash. So we're going to save this, and this is why I went ahead and added that content folder, because we're going to go to... Oh, I accidentally named the package sectpod, so that's unfortunate. But whatever. I'm going to go here, we're going to go XCOM War of the Chosen, there's my tutorial, and just pop it in the content folder, save your UPK. Alright, boom, we're done. So, next up, normally the instinct is going to be, oh, let me just go ahead and hit the import button and I'll import my asset. There's a lot of settings when importing a skeletal mesh that can be a little weird, and I found myself trying to import a skeletal mesh a lot and accidentally importing it as a static mesh, and sometimes can't figure out what the issue is. So what I do instead is I take the base that I'm basing my object off of, and all I do is I right-click on the copy I made, and I click Reimport Skeletal Mesh. And you can only do this once. The reason for that is when you hit Reimport Skeletal Mesh, it tries to look for the file path that the original came from and import the new one. You can see here, source file not found. Well, it's not found because we don't have the developer's original source for the sectoid FBX. So instead, it's asking us to look for a new one. So we're going to go into desktop, XCOM 2 mods, tutorial, and there's our dappersectoid.fbx. We'll double click on that, and it's going to import. And we're going to lose all our textures. It's fine, though. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Looks like the textures for the arm cannon didn't get lost. You can see it's trying to use the teeth textures for the hat. I don't know why it is, but sometimes the just the materials get a little weird. Let me double check and make sure that that hat had a material. If it didn't, this is going to be a good learning experience. It does seem to have a material though, so it should be fine. Let me go into texture paint real quick. Yeah, that checks out. Okay. So let's figure out what's going on here. All right. Alright, let's make sure that we're pointing this in the right direction. Because I might have screwed up the... Can't imagine that I screwed up any of the UVs. Alright. Let's check here. So let's go to materials. Let's go to sectoid. We want to find that materials instance comment constant. So this one should be it. Oh, no, I see. It applied it to the wrong object. So it was applying the sectoid texture, or the material for the sectoid, to the hat. So we're not going to worry about that. We're going to remove that material. And we're going to go back to our Dapper here. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead, and now we're going to actually import something. We're going to go into this textures area, and we're just going to take this. This is just a diffuse texture. Okay, so here's with actually importing textures. I'm going to go through the different settings here. If you want to import a diffuse, all you need to change from the default settings are texture group, and you can change it to texture group. For this instance, you can change it to texture group character, or you can change it to texture group cinematic. I normally do cinematic just because that's what Obelix does, and I like his mods. So for this instance, I'll use cinematic. If you're doing a mask, you're going to do character specular here. You just see character SP is specular. But the mask actually covers more than just specular data. And then if you're doing a normal map, you'll do character normal here. It just shows character no within the window. And you'll also go here to TC default for your texture compression. You'll change it to TC normal map BC5. But since this example just has a diffuse, we're just going to do texture group cinematic for the diffuse. We're going to hit OK. And I didn't put it in a texture subfolder, but that would be advisable. And then what I want to do is I want to get a constant. So I'm going to look for just a simple hat. And I'm just going to get any particular material instance constants. Ideally, you'd use like a fresh one or something. If you're more experienced with texturing than I do, you probably have your own preferences. But I'm just going to grab this normal material instance constant. I don't know why I'm explaining materials to you. You do maps. I'm speaking to Eclipse, who requested this. All right, so I'm just going to do this. Dapper. And we're just going to change this to MT, because that's what I like to do. Dapper hat. Okay. And here's my MT Dapper hat. I'm going to go ahead and open that material. Uncheck all this colorable stuff, because this is not going to be colorable. It's not going to use a pattern. We don't care. Actually, this might not be the best material to use for this. I'm going to actually delete this, because this is for a soldier. I don't actually know if it matters. But we're just going to use the sectoid material. Create a copy. MT underscore dapper hat package info dappers. Okay. Alright, and here I'm just going to open up the material. This doesn't have an alpha, so it doesn't have a mask at all. So I'm not going to change too much about any of that. I'm going to remove the mask and the normal, because this particular doesn't have any of those. So I'm just going to do this new diffuse. And that should be good. And so now going back into here, if I select the material instance, hit that, I'm just going to hit the Z there to refresh that, and we can see here it looks fine. Like, it looks fine. It looks like trash because it doesn't have a normal map or any of that crap, so it looks garbage. Obviously, if you were doing this for real, you would have good textures, but this is just a basic guide. Alright. So that's good. Bring that back up. We're fine with that. And just to show you that it works, we're going to go into sectoid. We go into sectoid anim. AS sectoid. And this should have all of the animations for the sectoid in here. So I'm going to select a particularly long one. Jeez, that's loud. Alright, and then all we got to do is we got to change out the skeletal mesh from SM sectoid to just this isn't actually necessary. This is just so we can see that it works. And we're looking for our dapper sectoid. We see it's in the same pose, and if we play that animation again, and we see the hat moves just fine. So that's super ideal. And that's literally all it takes to get like a cosmetic change into the editor. And we can see that moves just fine. Alright, so then I just go back to my dapper, and I'm going to go ahead and save this again. It's going to give you an error. It's fine. It's fine. So we're going to go ahead and hit yes. That's saved, and then that's literally it. At this point, all you would do is you would actually start going through the process of making an enemy, which there's plenty of, I believe that there's plenty of guides for already. And you're going to go ahead and it should be really easy if it's just a cosmetic change. Oh, actually, one more thing. If you want this to... the game can't actually point to a skeletal mesh itself. It's going to point to a archetype. So I do believe the archetype is in game unit sectoid, and we're going to copy this one too. So we're going to create a copy. And we're going to copy this to Dapper. And we're going to just arc game unit Dapper sectoid. Oh, crap. Drop my pie. Alright, and all we're going to do is we're going to open this up. We're going to go to our skeletal mesh under pawn. We're going to select our new mesh. We're going to pop it in there. That's it. Save it. That's it. So again, after that, you make an enemy as normal. If it's just a cosmetic change, then you're just going to be pointing to, for abilities and stuff, you're just going to be pointing to already existing abilities in the base game. It should be a very easy ini file to read. Again, I'm not super experienced with enemies myself. I'm just showing you how to produce the assets. Hopefully, this is what you were looking for in terms of help getting these assets into the game. Hopefully, you won't have too much trouble actually making your Viper Eclipse. And I believe that's it. Go ahead and ask me if you have any questions, and I'll try to help answer them to the best of my ability. I'll probably do more of these videos once I actually get started with actually making my Dark Souls enemy mod. And then I'll be able to go more deeply into the coding and such. But for right now, that's what I can help with. Hope it was helpful to you, and thanks for watching.